Go live. Hello everyone, welcome to Project Virtual Conference 2018. Today we have David Patrick presenting us on SharePoint and Project Better Together. So using SharePoint and Project Better Together. Before we get started on the session, I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions, you can use the chat box on the bottom of your screen to ask any questions, which will be addressed at the end of the session. All right, David, you can take it from here. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're dialing in from. 24-hour conference, we can get people from everywhere, so very excited to be here with you guys. This is SharePoint and Project Better Together. My name is Dave Patrick, and what I hope to do today is talk a little bit about some hidden or unknown features in SharePoint that can help you work with project management better, and specifically some integration points with Microsoft Project. So real quick, I know I was already introduced, but I've got a couple of slides where I just kind of mention my company. They're the ones that make it possible for me to do these kind of things. So I work for DSA. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, certified solutions expert, certified. I've got so many of these certifications, I'm starting to lose track. Whoops. I like to call this one out. This one was where Microsoft certified me dead. Microsoft Certified Professional Enterprise Application Developer. I always think that's kind of a hoot that they had a certification with the acronym that worked out to MCP dead, but hopefully that hasn't rung true yet. I'm a SharePoint developer at heart, subject matter expert. I work for the Army. I have a user group, Mad SharePoint. We're actually going to start virtual meetings. So we've been in existence for 6 years now, doing face-to-face, but starting with our next meeting, go to that link, sign up, and we will be virtual. So you can, it's still face-to-face, but you can also attend from anywhere. So that's very exciting for us. I mentioned my company, DSA, been around forever. We're always hiring. If anyone's looking, please give us a shout. And thanks to all our sponsors. So we've got all these sponsors that have made the virtual conference possible. Project Made Easy, Projectum, PPM, Sensi Project Solutions. They've got some really good books that I like to take a look at. Let me actually get rid of my little face there. I'm tired of looking at myself. So really thankful for all these sponsors that have made today possible, and definitely check them out. Take some time, look through the sponsors, see what they have to offer. You might find out that there's a quick, easy solution for not a lot of money to some of the issues you're facing. All right, so I have a quick video. We'll see if this plays or not. This is from Microsoft. This is a little bit older, but we call this Post-it Mania, and it just kind of highlights, it's real cheesy actually, but what, you know, I actually know some people that are in this situation.
Hey, remember I need the final touches on that proposal by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Got that vacation coming up. These need to be watered. This is weird. Ouch. And don't forget to feed this little fella. I'm out of here. Wow. Oh, hi. Sorry. It's the only way I can stay organized.
My friend, you could so use SharePoint to keep track without getting buried. The task management features help you stay on top of deadlines, assign tasks, and track your to-dos in one place. Sign, please. How's that for a package, huh?
I like knowing I have my work covered without it covering me. That's why I use SharePoint.
So real cheesy video there, but I do like the fact, I mean, I see a lot of folks using Post-its in a Kanban board where they've got that traditional to do, doing, done, and it's really nice to be able to move things around like that. And I don't know if anyone's used Planner. I'm not actually going to talk about Planner in my talk, but they have a nice type of Kanban board where you can move Post-it like boards for tasks and move them between the different sections. So it's an interesting thought. But the point of that video was that there are tools and technologies out there to use, and one that you probably have already is SharePoint and the task list. And so many people, so many project managers. I work with the Project Management Institute Baltimore chapter here in Maryland, and so many project managers I talk to are like, wow, I didn't realize that SharePoint had task management, and I didn't realize that those tasks could be synced with project. So what are our session objectives and takeaways? We want to look at SharePoint and how we can use the task lists and how to use them better. We're going to talk about some of the OOTB out-of-the-box workflows that are available. These are things that you as a site owner can turn on yourself. You don't need a developer. You don't need a coder. You don't need a farm admin. This is things that are there, easy to use. We'll talk about email alerts, audit trails, dashboards, charts, and look at different integration points with Office, specifically Project. If we have time, we'll look at how we can integrate with Excel and Outlook as well. So this is this is Microsoft's wheel of SharePoint functionality. This is actually the older one from 2010, but I still like it. It just highlights that there's so much power in SharePoint. It's such a platform. There's things like you can have, thanks for that message. There's social communities, there's content management, there's a great search capability built into it, business intelligence, insights. And then that last one, composites. That's one where we talk about how we can create applications using no code. So if I create a task list and then I've got a list of documents, I can create a page that combines those two in sort of a master detail application with no code, but just by adding a couple of web parts, connecting them together just as a site administrator. That's called a composite. And I'll have some links to more information about those later if you're interested in kind of dabbling in that sort of power user role. I do have a couple of slides where I just talk about there's tools out there for SharePoint. If you really say, let me take this to the next level, I've started using the task list, now I need to modify it, and SharePoint Designer is a tool that everyone talks about. It is considered a no-code tool for SharePoint. However, I would argue that a lot of my customers, when they look at it, they start seeing HTML and CSS. Argument, well, wait a minute, it's not C#, it's not VB.NET, it's not compiled code, but to them it's still code. So I've put this up there to kind of mention to people, the solutions I'm going to talk about don't require SharePoint Designer. So these are true no-code solutions. I'm talking about using out-of-the-box features through the browser. The other tool, or the other technologies, I mentioned HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, SPS services. Behind the scenes, there's Link, there's the server object model, the client object model. All these contribute to a sense that, if I use SharePoint, there's all these complicated things I have to learn, which is not true. There's so many out-of-the-box features you can use without having to necessarily delve. These are great when you later decide to take that next step, to go to the next level. You want to, go further extensions, further customizations, but there's so much power you can get without knowing all these technologies. And finally, the Visual Studio tool. These are your real coder / developer tools where you're building extensions that can be deployable, reusable, maybe for sale. And again, we don't really need this tool for our first level of box features. So what are some of these problems of SharePoint? Well, the first one is that developers, and specifically mean those are the ones that use Visual Studio and are trying to write code, they try too hard. And my analogy is the dentist hollered at me the other day. I put way too much toothpaste on my toothbrush. You only need a little dollop there. That's what I usually cover the whole toothbrush, but you only need a little bit. And the same thing in SharePoint. If you've got an approval that you want to, typical requirement I get from my end users, I need to have an approval process on my document library. A developer will go off and start, I've seen this happen in the real world, they'll go off and they'll start creating code. It's a 3 to 6 month project, but look, I'll zoom in here real quick if I can. Nope, I lost my zoom tool, that's okay. There's a publishing approval built right into SharePoint. You can go into your document library, and I'll show you. Let me jump out to my one of my SharePoint sites here. This is one I use with my user group Mad SharePoint site, and I'm in a document library. The site, I could come in here, and let me just switch to classic SharePoint for a minute. This is SharePoint Online, but I like it. I'll have it mimic a SharePoint on-premises site for us. And you can go into the library settings of your document library and say, you know what, I need an approval. So whenever someone puts a document in this document library, I want an approval to be on it. Here's how fast you can do it. You can literally come in here, say workflow settings, And under that, there should be a set of workflows that I can add out of the box. I haven't had a developer create these. I haven't, you know, this is just as it comes. Now, there may be, if there's no workflows, as is the case here, I haven't activated them yet, right? So there is but again, it doesn't require a developer. So what I would do is I'd come into my site features and activate the workflow features, which would then populate that list. So I'd come in here to site features and I'd say, hey, I need some workflows. Let's go find those workflows. It should be down here somewhere, and make them available to our site. So let's see if we can find our workflows here. And there is 2 levels of site features. So let's see. Let me just cheat and type so we can find it quickly. A couple different workflows I have available. I've got my workflow task. So it looks like at this level, I don't have the workflow features. I'm going to go up a level to my site collection features. So scroll down here, site collection features, and activate the workflow at that level. I'm going to find my workflow. Looks like I've got my disposition already activated. Okay, so, oh, here we go. Publishing active, project server active, they're active. Okay, everything's active. Wanted to make sure, yep, they're active, so we're good. If they weren't active, then my list would be empty. Since they're active, there's no reason my list shouldn't be empty. Connect to my document library settings, my workflow settings. Thanks for that message. And again, out of the box in our document library, we should be able to go in and I probably shouldn't be picking on the site assets one because that is one of the default ones. If this doesn't work, I'll bring up a fresh, oh, there we go. I just didn't click the button. Okay, so right, these are the available out of the box workflows, as long as I have the features activated, that I can add to any document library in my site. And the approval is probably one of the most used ones. So with this, I could come in here, click the approval workflow, give it a name, you know, approval, tell it where I want to store the tasks associated with a workflow. The way workflows work is they will create a task for every time. So if someone uploads a new document and I have an approval workflow on this document library, it's going to create a task for someone to approve that newly uploaded document. So I got to go put it, I'll actually create a history list. I can use an existing one, or I can say, hey, and that just keeps track of all the operations. You know, someone uploaded a document, someone approved it, someone rejected it, etc. Then I can come down here and choose, when do I want this? Do I want this to be a manually thing? Do I want someone to have edit permissions, which is a bit higher level? Maybe I want this workflow to automatically start when a new document gets uploaded. Or maybe if a document changes, I want this. So if someone's made a change, maybe that's got to be approved. So depending on what my business requirement is how I would configure this. But again, no coding here. I'm just configuring a document library with my site owner permissions. And now, in a few clicks, I've added an approval process to this document library where I have seen it before. Developers have, not knowing that this was out-of-box functionality was available, they would just go off and build an approval process and take, write code, come up with a deployable solution, and they literally could have come into the document library, gone into configuration, and added this in about 5 to 10 minutes. So that's one of the, problems that require a lot of effort. They don't. There's so many out-of-the-box features. There's another example of a simple solution that exists. This is what my electric lawnmower, and it would constantly pull the plug out. And he let me do that for about an hour before he finally came over and said, listen, silly, take your extension cord, take your cord that's connected to the lawnmower, and tie them in a knot, like so. And darn itself, It was a simple solution. I just wasn't aware of it. Once I was made aware of it, bam, I use it all the time. And it's, you know, the same thing with SharePoint. There are simple solutions out there. You don't need a developer to spend a whole bunch of time building a solution. So another example I have here is creating, what do we have here? This is, email notification, right? So email notification is another feature that a lot of people ask for in a SharePoint. Created, I like them to give an email to let them know they have that task assigned to them. And I've seen developers go off and build, you know, I'm going to write some code, I'll do a timer job, I'll do an event receiver, and it's like, no, none of that's necessary. Literally, you can, again, I'll jump back to SharePoint. This is the other half of the workflow I never did finish, I hit next, but called approvers, yeah, a message in the request. You can have dates for when the task, you know, in this case, the approval workflow, when it was due, things like that. So we won't finish that now. Go back to our document library settings. So let's go to a task list. This is the default task list that comes with a team site. You can add additional ones, and a lot of times what I'll do is if I create a team site for a group, maybe the HR group, every time they have a new project, I'll create a new task list to keep them separate. So they get one out of the box with their team site, but you can see down here I've got a couple different task lists. There's issues with Harvard task list, one. So in this example, this is the default task list. And the idea is that when you have a task list, by default, when I just create one, and maybe I should just create a fresh one, you won't have, I'm going to go to the list settings, similar to what I did with my document library. In this particular task list, I would like to have my users, when they get assigned tasks, so when someone adds a new task and puts a name in there, I want them to get an email notification to let them know that there's been a new task assigned to them. So literally, I come in here to my task list, go to the ribbon, click on configuration of this, just like I did with document library, and I can make some changes there. So if I click it, which I think I had done, we're getting a little slightly slow internet connection there. Let's read in these settings. We'll let that think about it for a minute. Oh, there we go. It's coming up now. What we'll see is see just like document library, you know, workflow settings, advanced settings, version settings. But in this case, we're interested in, I believe it's under advanced settings. And we're looking for that setting just for like to assign an email or I want to send an email every time a task is assigned. So I'll scroll down here and I'll say, yep, look at this, email notification, send send an email when ownership is assigned. By default, it's no. I'll change it to yes. And now magically, every time, let's go down here and hit OK. Leave it to yes. Now, whenever I've made the list, let me come back to the regular size so I can see the OK button. Whenever I do a new task to this list, the user is going to get an email saying this is the task, this is the due date, this is, and you can, there's a little bit, and pretty much all the information, gives them a link to the task. Again, it's just that easy. Once you create a new task list, by the way, how do I create a new task list? So in the settings, I'll go ahead and add SharePoint. And I work with a different, a lot of different versions of SharePoint: 2007, 2010, 2013, 2016, SharePoint Online. This all works in all those versions. It looks a little different though. There's different terminologies changed slightly differently. So in this version, SharePoint Online /2016/2013, when you create a new list, you have to add an app. They kind of use app and list interchangeably. So I want to add a new task list. Let's pretend I've got a new project for Manage SharePoint, and I'll add an app. In this case, I'm going to add a task list for an upcoming meeting that we have. So say our next meeting is in June. So we maybe need a task list to handle setting up the June meeting project. It's a mini project. But we need to, what do we need for our meeting? Someone needs to order food. We need to get the invite list together, get a speaker. So with all that, let's go create a new project, AKA task list. So I'm going to say I want a new task. So I just click the task icon from all the different apps. And again, in SharePoint 2013-16, they call them apps, even though template for that app. It's thinking about it. It's working on it. Here's a little side note. That little spinning wheel, you can click on it to make it go away if it ever gets on your nerves. We'll call this my Mad SharePoint June meeting. And we'll go create that. I guess I could have put spaces, but saving some space there. Now, I'm going to go out and create that list. And as I mentioned, by default, it won't have the task email assignment on. So I'll have to go to the settings of that. So what I generally do when I create a new task list, there it is go right to the settings right after I do it, and then modify emails to be sent whenever something's assigned, which is typically what I want. There is a way, by the way, for you to set it up so that when you create it, it's automatically configured that, but that is a higher level extension. That's not something you can do out of the box. That does usually require an administrator or a developer to go in and do something called feature stapling, where they staple. But what I do, I just come in here and say, yep, we want this to be an email to be sent every time a task is assigned. We'll say okay to that. And now that new task list that I created to manage my June meeting will send emails when I add tasks to that task list. In fact, let's go ahead and add a few tasks to this task list. So let's go look at the task list. We'll click on it here. And what are some of the tasks? So kind of show you how easy it is to add some tasks to a task list. So I'm doing my project management in SharePoint. What did we say? We want to be able to so let's edit this list. And in 2013, 2016, we got a nice SharePoint 2013, 2016, we have a nice kind of Excel-like experience where we can type in data. We don't have to do that, but here we can just kind of say, all right, I've got to get a speaker on the 30th, so we need that by the 15th. And I'll assign that to myself. Maybe. Okay, we'll come back and assign that in a second. For some reason, my typing is not going in. What else do we want to do? We need to buy food, order the food for the meeting. And we also need that. Well, that doesn't have to happen until the actual meeting. Oh, so it's a new task list. SharePoint's trying to help me. It's saying, hey, maybe some of these tasks need to be on your timeline. You'll notice up here, I get a cool timeline for my project. The first one it does for me to kind of let me know how it's done or how it looks. If there's additional tasks, that would be kind of weird, especially if I had hundreds to have them all on the timeline. Usually only want the sort of important ones up there. So we'll come back to that. So yeah, thanks for the tip there, SharePoint. We're going to say this is the 30th. We actually want it when the meeting's happening. And we're going to assign that to Tracy. Tracy's one of my team members, and we'll let her do that for me. This one finally caught up, so now I can name a tenant that I'm using. So And what you also might notice is I'm in there several times. This particular, since it's Office 365, I do have an external sharing on, and I have some external email addresses. So they're not all just Mad SharePoint. There are some, I had like a Stevenson email in there, and I think maybe a Hotmail. So that's kind of neat. All right, so what else? Get speaker, order the food. We need prizes. Organize the prizes or pick the prizes from our prize box. Pick prizes for the giveaway. And that also will need to happen, I don't know, maybe by the 20th. And see, is Aaron around to help us with that? Nope, no. Aaron's not on this team. So let's see, who else do we have? Who else do we have? Sarah. There we go. All right. So as you can imagine, now I've got the workings of, and maybe, you know, oh, this one's got a problem. What didn't it like? Didn't like the way I put that in there. So notice when you put something in, I guess I missed out on the space there. It hollered at me with a little, or I could use the little calendar picker to put the date in if I really wanted to be lazy. Maybe I can put the calendar picker, maybe not. All right. 2018, there we go. I think it was preventing me from doing the calendar picker because I had some text in there or something. Anyway, now that I have a couple different tasks in there, I can, if I wanted to have this guy on the timeline, I could click on the ellipsis there and say, hey, show this on the timeline. That's an important task. I'd like to see that. Maybe this one is also important, so we're going to add that one to the timeline too. And then in theory, when it finally catches up here, we'll start seeing, there we go, there's the pick prizes, and give it another few seconds, and then the order food should also show up. So it's doing all this asynchronously in the background. It looks like the calendar picker finally showed up. So it was just being slow. It uses web services, so anyone's interested in what's going on behind the scenes at point, and that's why we're seeing a little bit of, you know, lag with my slow connection. I'm broadcasting as well as trying to use all this. It's noticeably laggy. It's normally not this laggy, but so that was a quick creating a new task list, setting it up so that the users get emails when they're assigned tasks, and adding a few items to the timeline. Let's jump back to our slides and see what other problems. Needed features are hidden. So in SharePoint, a lot of features, and this is a great example of a needed feature that was hidden, is my wife kind of included me in on this one. In my Reynolds wrap, I was always picking up the foil and it would roll into the floor. My wife said, come on, stupid. There's a button to push on the end to stop that. And I was like, you're out of your mind, no way. Sure enough, there is. And if you look, it actually even says press here to lock the end. Wow. So I wish I had known about that hidden feature, you know, hidden in quotation marks, because it's not hidden, it's right there. But same thing with SharePoint. When you first create a SharePoint site, they give you all these, you know, icons to get started with your site. There's one for setting up permissions on your site. There's creating a branding or style. And there's these little wizards that help you with all that. But so many people I know will go and just hide this, remove this, or they ignore these hidden features that are right in front of your face. So it's really funny. And again, I'll show you if I jump over to SharePoint. If I'm doing a whole new team site for, you know, one or more projects, if I come in here and I go into my site contents and say, you know, I need to create a site that's working on maybe a new speaker bureau. When I first create that site, it's surprising how much stuff you get. You know, SharePoint's trying to help you. It's trying to say, here's some things that you might want. So let's see if we can come over here down to the end of all my apps, and we're going to create a new sub-site. So when I create a new sub-site, you know, this is some sub-team I've got working, and they might have one or projects. They have them in their sub-site, they can have one or more task lists. So we'll call this the speakers team, right? We'll call this speakers. So I'm creating a new kind of site. Is this a team site? Is it a blog, a project site? There's all sorts of templates you can use, enterprise templates, publishing templates, but we're going to keep it simple with the collaboration team site. And then when we add maybe the permissions to this site are not the same as the parent site. Maybe it's only 3 people and they've got to keep it down on the down low, hush hush. If I want to use unique permissions, I can. If I want to use the same permissions, I can do that too. So we'll just keep speakers for my speaker team. And again, what's interesting is as soon as if I do this and create that for my team site, by the way, here's me getting rid of that little circle. I'll click on it, now the circle's gone. The team site, when it does finally pop up, will show up with all those icons that are trying to just kind of dismiss them or even hide them, and then later call me up and say, hey, well, how do I add branding? How do I add additional lists? How do I ignore some of the stuff that's right in front of these quote-unquote hidden features? And this will take a minute, so we'll come back to this. So the last thing I want to mention is, people use it wrong, right? And this is the actual plunger that I need to use in my toilet. Prior to this, I used something called a sink plunger, which does not look like this. It's kind of red and doesn't have that little extra. It does not work very well. So you got to use the right tool for the right job. In SharePoint, the classic problem with SharePoint is that people will just dump a file share in SharePoint and then say, wow, SharePoint sucks. It's really slow. SharePoint is not meant to have 1,000 folders in it. That's the best way to make SharePoint perform badly. You definitely need to properly organize your documents and files. So here's an example where I've uploaded some documents, but I've added metadata, right? Maybe I've added a project column. What is metadata? It's just columns about your data. So project, the document type, maybe a description, possibly an owner, some additional information, and then I can create views on that metadata so that my, instead of needing a full view, just show me all the documents related to this project. Just show me all the documents related to that, different documents to different projects. I can even have a single document be multiple projects. You can't do that with folders, right? If you stick something in one folder, it's only in one folder. With metadata, you can have multiple metadata tags associated to a document, and it'll show up in both views. So once you learn how to do it correctly, it becomes much more performant. All right, so let me jump into my task demo. I kind of did some of this already. We created the task list. We added some new tasks. Deleting a task is pretty simple if we want to see that. We talked a little bit about the timeline. You can actually have subtasks by doing indents, and then you can create different task views. So look at that. This is really where when you have a new task list, you can start really making it look and feel like a Microsoft project. So here's that new team site that we just did. I'm going to actually use this icon to add a new task to this new team site. So there's some sort of list library or other. And actually, I actually want to show that one. This is that icon I just created was the sort of any kind of task. But specifically, if I'm working on a project, working on a deadline, I can use this icon to say, hey, let's see let me add specifically a task with a timeline and a calendar to help me keep track of my project. So that second one there really does, you're working on a project, and you want to use SharePoint to centralize task updates in a central calendar, that second icon is your best friend. So now I've got my speakers team site. It's got a project summary web part that shows, the status of my tasks. I haven't added any tasks yet, but when I do, they'll start showing a summary here. Now I can go into the tasks that it created. Maybe if I want those email assignments, next step is to go into the settings and add email assignments. I can edit this task list. So as a speaker bureau, we need to, reach out to some potential speakers. We might need to confirm speaker for the next meeting. You might need to create a speaker database. And again, set some dates on this thing. Well, let's see, we'll say this is due next week. Oops. That's not what we wanted. We'll assign this to me. Assign that to Tracy. And I'll assign that to Tracy. Some of that. There we go. And again, let's add that to that one. So the first one, I went too quick to see the pop-up, but again, it added that first one to the. So you can see how quickly its features. I mentioned you can start doing like indents and sub. So certainly, if you know, if part of creating a speaker database involves a few additional steps, right? You've got to select. You've got to select the database management system. What else do we have to do? We have to gather requirements for what type of data we're going to capture. Whoop. Requirements. Looks like it gave me an error message about trying to add a task without a date. So once you start saying, you know, these are subtasks, right? You can create subtasks, or you know, what else? Look at SQL, right, and see how it's indented. But now you're thinking, great, Dave. This gives me a lot of, you know, I'm feeling like that's a subtask now, and I can roll that up. But I really want to use project. Well, under the list setting, you can say, hey, let's open this with project. Let's actually get the full features of project with this task list. And what this does for me is gives me two things. One, it allows me to use the full features of project. And I had another project open earlier, so we'll let this open up the one I just did. And two, it doesn't, but it still allows me to have my end users not use project. So they can use SharePoint to do task updates. I don't need to buy licenses for my team members, but as a project manager, I can still come in here and use all the full features of project. So now there's the task that I just entered in SharePoint, and we can say, you know what, that's actually due, what would we say? I'm fat fingering and stuff. Let's see here, that. We said that was, we'll change that just for fun. We'll make that 21. There's, okay, so we added some updates there. We can even add another task. Now, in SharePoint, when we want those features to be reflected, so they're not there yet. But in project, when I'm ready, I'll save this. And look at that, it automatically syncs with the task list in SharePoint. So it knows, because I created this project from SharePoint, it knows to sync with SharePoint every time I make changes. So it goes, reaches out using web services to the SharePoint server and makes those updates. What did we add? We added a couple different dates. We added an extra task to buy the system, the database system for our speaker database. And now when we go out to SharePoint and refresh our window, we should see that new task and those 3 dates that we updated. Give that a second to freshen up. So again, the big benefit here, and this is the problem I encounter with all my customers, is that they have to, they think they have to buy projects for all, you know, I've got 5 members on my team, I've got to buy copies of projects. If you do that, then how are you going to your project plan. You kind of give that to the project manager. He puts the project plan out, the project plan synced to a task list on SharePoint, and now all the members can go to SharePoint and make their updates. And hopefully SharePoint's a lot faster than even for me at the moment. But yeah, here we go. It saves me a lot of money, right? So there's the updated there. There's the by system. There's the dates that we added. Now I can add this one to the timeline. It really, really is a cost savings. The end users, a lot of my end users that are on my project team don't even want to use project, right? So they have to install it. It's, forget it. They're very happy for me to say, here's SharePoint, here's a test list. So as an end user, I come in here, I make a change. I'll say, you know what, I completed looking at SQL and decided it's the way to go. I go back to, now that I put my project manager hat back on, in project, when I want to get my end users updates, so my end users, said, hey, yeah, we had a meeting, I've done some updates. I said, all right, let me hit save here. And now it's going to go out to SharePoint and look for any end user updates. And those are going to come and be synced down to the project plan, right? So we should see, look at that, the select database was completed. It took a day. So whoever that team member was, when they made their update, and I can see, and you can, and it's not like I lose who did it. If I go back to SharePoint, you'll see under the task is a property to say who modified that, right? So I certainly can come in here and say, hey, let's open this task, and I'll see all the information about that task, including who created it, who it was last updated by. In this case, it's 100% complete. So all the information is there. Another thing you can do, I get asked this a lot, is people say, well, hey, someone made an update, but there was a mistake, or I wanted to know who did it. You could certainly come into your list and say, I want to turn on versioning. So now if someone makes a change to the task and I want to revert to a previous version, because maybe there's like a lot of descriptive text or something, I can certainly have versioning on and say, I want to keep so many versions. Or if I don't put it in a limit, it would just keep an unlimited amount of versions. That's a nice safety feature. It's not on out of the box. It's something I like to turn on. It's one of those hidden features people don't know about, but it's very easy to do. Content approval was in that listing, where people, if they make changes, I may not want to display those changes to the rest of the team until I approve them. I could turn that on. What else was in there that we can turn on? What did we mention? We mentioned the email assignments. We mentioned the versioning. Oh, audit logs, I know. So what if I want to just know what changes were made? That's actually at a higher level. So not at the task, at the list level, but for my whole team site. So in this whole site, if I decided, you know what, I want to keep track of, if anyone's made changes, if anyone's read any data, I'd like to audit that. Now there is a cost, there is a performance cost involved. But I can come in here to my site settings and say, for this particular team site, actually it's for the whole site collection. So not just the sub-site, but for all the sites. So I do need to go up to the site collection level for this. I will say, for all these sites in this particular actions, or some of the actions, or some subset of the actions. So under the site collection administrative settings in SharePoint, I can choose to say, yes, I want to audit different actions that are going on. So I can come in here and say, hey, let's scroll down here to my audit settings and say site collection audit settings. A lot of people will go to the audit log reports and they'll be empty. By default, audit's turned off for performance reasons. So they'll go to this, they'll be empty, and they'll say, oh my gosh, this doesn't work. The problem is they didn't know they have to configure the audit settings first. Configure them, then the reports will have data. Be aware though, it's going to take up space on the server, and it's also going to, you have a small performance hit. So it's good to limit the number of audit logs that you're going to, when you turn this on. So we like to automatically trim them. We keep them for 90 days. That's a good default. And, only audit things that you really need to audit. So editing items is usually a good one. Checking things in and out if that's important to you. If people are moving stuff, deleting or restoring. Some additional things here to check off. It doesn't happen a lot, so it doesn't take a lot of space. But when it does happen, I like to know who edited someone's. So these are some of the auditing features you can turn on for a site collection. We'll just accept all those. And now when I'm doing what my site, again, another one of those sort of hidden features that so many people want, they didn't even know they were available, much less that they could turn them on themselves. So really, really good stuff. All right, let's see what else we had on our agenda. Workflows, we talked a little bit about the approval workflow that was available out of the box. Some other ones, the 3-state workflow is available out of the box. That takes your task list through 3 different statuses. It could be, well, here, let me show you. So if I'm in my category in my left side navigation, we're going to look at some other workflows that we might want to add to this particular list. So click in here on the list, the advanced settings, or the workflow settings. So we'll go to settings. And again, this is one of those things where people are saying, hey, great, I've got this list, but I want to add some additional functionality. Can you add approval? Yes, it's already there, an approval workflow. Can I add workflow? And sometimes people don't even know that they're asking to add a workflow. They're saying, is there any way that I can get a notification when this task goes to completed, or when this task goes to resolved, or when this task is new? So the 3-state workflow is what can help you do that. It will say that as a task or an issue switches from new to completed, or new or completed to resolved, or I'm sorry, new to resolved, resolved to completed. That's the standard out of the box, right? So let me go here and I'll choose 3-state, right? And we'll call this notify changes, right? Because I basically want an email whenever a task goes from one status to another. Again, I'll do a new list for this particular work. Starts. So we'll say next. And then the next screen has me set up, based on which column do I want this to fire off of. So in this case, we'll use the priority field. And there's 2 different choices out of the box, priority and task status. So what's task status? If it's not started, once it goes to in progress, I can send an email, and then when the rest of the options are pretty much default. What kind of information do I want included in the information email? Who do I want emailed? What details, et cetera, et cetera. So again, a really cool feature. Somebody says, hey, I want to be notified when a task goes from in progress to completed. I add a workflow, no custom development required, just configuration of my task list, and then that functionality is now available. So again, a real nice way to add functionality without a lot of effort. The issue is a special case of the task list, and it actually has a status column called, it starts off new, resolved, and completed. So it's almost, I never create an issues list without adding the 3-state workflow. It's like those 2 are meant to be together. All right, so we've went through a lot of stuff here. We're coming up on 7 minutes, so I do want to leave a couple minutes for Q&A. But we went through how to make tasks better, how to do some of the out-of-box workflows, talked a little bit about some different alerts and audit trails. I didn't get a chance to do dashboards and charts real quick, but we did do a little bit of project integration. I will do, since I got a couple minutes, I'll do a quick, easy dashboard and chart, and then I'll open it up for questions. So the question I get a lot, the last out-of-the-box easy feature when doing tasks, the status of my project in a nice dashboard put up on a web page somewhere, and the answer is it's really easy to do using Excel and SharePoint. So what I can do is I can, and of course you can do it in a project too, right? So if I've got it already synced to project, there's all sorts of reports in project that I can look at. But if I want it available to the CEO who doesn't have time to open a project, I can, like I did with projects, I'll say, in this case, instead of earlier, I opened it with project. Here, I'm going to export it to Excel. And what that does is that's going to make a connection from this task list and open it in Excel. It's a live connection that I can refresh later. So I only have to do this once. Then I can share this Excel spreadsheet either by putting it into SharePoint, putting it in an Excel services web part, or I can open it up on their desktop and refresh it from there. But that live connection will be maintained. So even after I send it, let's go ahead and enable. This is a query that's actually what contains the information that says, get this data from a SharePoint refresh, and we'll give them the latest information. So that's the real power. When you connect SharePoint task lists to Excel, and create a dashboard for one of my CEOs or whatever, it's not static. I just tell them, they say, hey, I need a new fresh copy. In fact, what I'll do for my CEOs is I'll change the Excel document to say auto refresh on open. So refresh on open. For some of my more technically inclined folks, I'll just tell them go to data and hit refresh. So this is reading the data. You can see down here, it's connecting to the data source. It's going to pull down all that task data that I connected from the task list, and it's going to bring it in a table, which then I can apply a pivot chart to. And that gives me my easy dashboarding type chart. So it's taken a second. I probably picked a larger task list, so it's taken a minute to pull down all the different tasks. But when it's complete, it'll show up here in a pivot table, and I can simply say insert pivot chart, and then we'll have a nice cool chart. So while that's thinking, I will open it up for questions. Does anyone have a question? Any hands up? Let's see. Hopefully, it's a lot of useful stuff. There's a lot of there's our task list. It's a lot of out of the box, free features that maybe people weren't that well aware of. Here's the task that came down from SharePoint. And again, the easiest thing to do is insert a chart. Sounds good. I could do a whatever I'm interested in. Little dash I'll do is I'll do several different ones and then put them together in one page, and that kind of looks like a dashboard. So we'll do another one. All right, so now I've got this one, I've got that one, and right now it says I've got what I'm somewhat completed. But if I go back to SharePoint and were to complete a few more things, and then I come back to my Excel and I refresh the data, those numbers should change because they're getting, there we go, we got some additional completions. And that's what I mean when I say it's, my CEO, I would just tell them reopen the document and it'll be refreshed on open. So great. Hopefully that was helpful. I've got, again, 3 minutes left. I'll leave it open there for any potential questions. Feel free to email me if you later think, I've got, I had a question. There's a couple links I point no code, SP no code. It talks all about additional composites that you can create using just configuration techniques that I showed for better project management, better task management. If you want to start putting your SharePoint developer hat, mssharepointdeveloper.com is a great list of different resources for taking it even further. So really a lot of information out there for free from Microsoft on how to get started project management using task lists in SharePoint and adding all these cool features like email notification and dashboards and things like that. All right. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Hopefully you got something out of it, and you'll be doing even better project management using SharePoint and project.
Thank you, David. I don't see any questions here so far, so thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.